Alright, this is lesson 15, solving absolute value equations. So what does it mean when we have an absolute value? An absolute value is asking something's distance from 0. So if we wanted the absolute value of 5, we would say, how far away is 5 from 0? And that distance is always going to be positive. So when we evaluate an absolute value, we're always going to get a positive number if we're finding the absolute value of a negative integer. How far away is -3 from 0? It's 3 units away, so the absolute value of -3 is 3. We'll always get a positive answer. Our example, what's the absolute value of 7? Would be 7. The absolute value of -8 is +8. We treat absolute value symbols just like any other grouping symbol. That's what it is. It's a grouping symbol. So what we need to do, anything inside our absolute value, we'll need to evaluate that first. So what's -5 plus 2? That makes -3. So this is the absolute value of -3. And the absolute value of -3 is 3 units from 0, so it's +3. 4, we need to evaluate what's inside our absolute value first. So this is negative. That little negative sign means -1 times the absolute value of -2, because that's what 3 minus 5 is. The absolute value of -2 is 2, so we've got -1 times 2. And -1 times 2 makes -2. So the whole reason that became negative is because that negative sign right out there in front means to multiply by -1 at the end. So you guys try to do this. Hit pause, take a couple seconds, try and do this. We look at this, we say 5 minus 9 makes -4, so this is 2 plus the absolute value of -4. The absolute value of -4 is 4, so 2 plus 4, and 2 plus 4 is 6. Our next one, this is 3 times. When there's no sign in between, that's a multiplication. So the absolute value of -5 is 5, so this is 3 times 5 plus 6. And now we're just following our order of operations. 3 times 5 is 15. And 15 plus 6 makes 21. Example 2, solving absolute value equations with a variable. So now we see we've got a variable inside our absolute value symbol. If we were to think of this on a number line, and now what kind of number could I substitute in here for x to get a +4? So, well, the absolute value of 4 equals 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, right? That's 4 units away. What else is 4 units away? -4 is also 4 units away. So, -4, the absolute value of -4 also equals 4. So x can be 2 answers, a +4 and a -4. Well, how do we do this? Well, algebraically, we do this by setting up 2 different sides of our equation. So this is what I mean by that. When we get our equation down to where all we have is an absolute value on one side and our constants on the other, we say we're going to have a positive side and a negative side. Our positive side, we just rewrite the equation exactly how it is, but we take out the absolute value symbols. Our negative side, we rewrite the equation exactly how it is, but now we make this constant term here, we change the sign of the constant term, so that's -4. And those are our 2 answers. X could equal 4, because the absolute value of 4 is 4, and x could also equal -4, because the absolute value is -4 is 4. So we can do it again on this next problem. The absolute value of x minus 3 equals 8, so we're down to just absolute value, so we say we've got our positive side, which is x minus 3 equals 8, and our negative side. That's the biggest trouble we have in this lesson, is remembering to do the negative side, and remembering that this 8 on our negative side becomes a negative 8. We're going to solve these equations just like we would any other equation. We're going to work backwards through our order of operations, doing inverse operations. So the inverse of subtracting 3 would be to add 3, so we're adding 3 to both sides. Our steps will always be the same for our negative side, but our answers will be a little different because we're adding negative 8 and 3, and that makes negative 5. Now you can always check your work by substituting in your answer back into the original problem. So what's 11 minus 3? Well, that's 8. The absolute value of 8 is 8. We could try negative 5. What's negative 5 minus 3? That makes negative 8. What's the absolute value of negative 8? 8. So both of them work. Now, because when we take an absolute value, it makes our number positive, right? The absolute value of anything would make a positive. I can't do this problem because if I plugged in a negative 2 in for x, well, what's the absolute value of negative 2? That equals 2. If I plugged in a 2 in for x, what's the absolute value of 2? That is 2. There's no way to get a negative answer. So when we get something like this, where all we have is absolute value on one side and then a negative constant on the other, we say that we have no solutions. No solutions. You guys try these. Take a second. Try them out. Hit pause if you need to. So this first problem, all we have is our absolute value. So we've got our positive side and our negative side. Our positive side, x equals 7. Our negative side, x equals negative 7. We've got two answers. Our next one, we have absolute value, so we're going to go right into our positive and negative. Our positive side, x plus 4 equals 7. Our negative side, x plus 4 equals negative 7. Don't forget about your negative side. To solve this, inverse operations, subtract 4 from both sides. 7 minus 4 is 3. Same steps on our other side. Now negative 7 minus 4 makes negative 11. Is it okay that we have a negative answer? Well, let's check. If I substituted in a negative 11 here, what's negative 11 plus 4? That makes negative 7. What's the absolute value of negative 7? Is 7, so it works. 3 plus 4 is 7. Absolute value of 7 is 7. On our last example, or you try, the absolute value of x equals negative 5. Well, I can't take the absolute value of anything and get a negative number. So this is going to be no solutions. Example 3. For example 3, I've got an equation that equals something, and all I have left is my absolute value. So we're going to go straight into our positive side and our negative side. My positive side, 4x minus 2 equals 22. Our negative side, 4x minus 2 equals negative 22. And we're going to solve these both for x. What's happening to our x? It's being multiplied by 4, being subtracted by 2. We'll undo the subtraction first with addition. We get 4x equals 24. We'll divide by 4, and we get x equals 6. Our other side, our steps will be the exact same. We'll add 2. What's negative 22 plus 2? That makes negative 20. We'll divide by 4, and we get x equals negative 5. Our next example is a little bit different because we have other stuff on our absolute value side. I've got a 2 here, and I've got a 3 here. So what does that mean? It means we want to get rid of this 2 and this 3. So what are we going to do? Well, first we need to know what operations they are. This 2 is a positive 2. If I were to rewrite this equation, I could rewrite it with the 3 out in front times the absolute value of x plus 6, and then say plus 2 over here on this right side. And here it's a little bit easier. What are we doing with this 2? We're adding 2. What are we doing with the 3? If a number's out in front of a grouping symbol without any other side, usually that means to distribute into it. Now we're going to do something different here, but we'll show you here. First, to get rid of this positive 2, because we're working our way backwards through our order of operation, SADMEP. So we're going to undo addition and subtraction before we undo multiplication and division. How are we going to undo the addition? We're going to subtract. So now we have 3 times the absolute value of x plus 6 equals 12. Now, normally we would distribute. Well, what operation is distribution? And if you said multiplication, you're absolutely right. So now, what undoes multiplication? Division. So we're going to divide by 3. That will simplify those 3's out, and so now we're left with the absolute value of x plus 6 equals, 12 divided by 3 is 4, not 9. And now that we've got our equation where all I have is absolute value on one side, now we can go back to our positive and our negative sides. So our positive side, we just rewrite this as x plus 6 equals 4, and our negative side, x plus 6 equals negative 4. Well, what's the inverse of adding 6? Subtracting 6, and we get x equals negative 2. And we subtract 6 and subtract 6, and we get x equals negative 10. You guys try these two. So after you take a second and do it, we can see this negative 8 outside. So what undoes subtracting 8? Adding 8 and adding 8. So now we have the absolute value of 2x minus 4 equals 18. Once we've got just our absolute value on one side, we can do our positive side and our negative side. We say 2x minus 4 equals 18, and our other side, 2x minus 4 equals negative 18. Well, what would we do to solve these? We've got multiplication and we've got subtraction. We'll undo the subtraction first. 2x equals 22, divide by 2, and x equals 11. On our other side, our steps will be the same. What's negative 18 plus 4? Negative 14. Our steps are the same. We'll divide by 2 again. Negative 14 divided by 2 makes negative 7. So now our other side, our other equation, what does this negative sign out in front mean? The negative sign means we're multiplying by negative 1. So what undoes multiplying by negative 1? Dividing by negative 1. So we divide by a negative 1. When we divide by a negative, we get the absolute value of 5x minus 1 equals positive 4. Now when we do these, we say we've got our positive side and our negative side. 5x minus 1 equals 4. Our negative side, 5x minus 1 equals negative 4. What would we do? We'd add 1. 4 plus 1 makes 5. 5x equals 5. Divide by 5, divide by 5, and we get x equals 1. Or our steps will be the same on this other side. We'll add 1. What's negative 4 plus 1? That makes negative 3. Divide by 5, divide by 5, and now we have a fraction. X equals negative 3/5. Our homework today is lesson 15. Make sure we're doing our work on a separate sheet of paper.